partner at Squire Patton Boggs here in Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you all for coming today for this important and critical and timely Hot Talks discussion we're having regarding the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU between the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association and our local minority bars, and what this partnership really means for our legal community here. By way of background, it's old news that the legal field struggles with issues of diversity. I am ecstatic to have been recently named a partner at my law firm, Squire Patton Boggs. But the reality is that if you look across firms in Northeast Ohio, there are a few partners who look like me, and it's not just in Northeast Ohio, but really across the nation. Recently, a photo of an all-white partnership class in New York went viral, and in response, 170 general counsels, GCs, wrote a letter crying out for a more diverse legal representation amongst the firms that they hire. And as an industry, we're really struggling with issues of diversity, racial, ethnic, gender, and sexual orientation. We're simply not reflective of the diversity of our nation. And that's what makes this whole MOU really exciting. And so the prospect of change on the horizon and working together in collaboration. And so we have an esteemed group of panelists here today who are going to talk more about that and what all of this means and why this is relevant. So at this time, without further ado, I'll give a brief introduction for all the panelists, then I'll sit down and we'll get into our discussion. First, to my right, we have Marlon Primes. He's a man who really needs no introduction. We all know and have been touched by him in some way, but I'll attempt to give a very brief intro here. Marlon was born and raised in Akron. He has served as the Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio for the past 23 years. He's a graduate of Ohio University and Georgetown University Law Center, was the first African-American president of the William K. Thomas chapter of the American Inns of Court here in Cleveland, where he is the master of the bench. He has served as the national vice president of the National Bar Association, or NBA, the oldest and largest association of African-American attorneys in the country. And Marlon is very active in the Ohio State Bar, having held several leadership and board positions, as well as CMBA and its foundation. Indeed, Marlon has been integral to the work of CMBA and this MOU, and he currently serves as the president. To Marlon's right, we have Valisa Turner Howard. She's a dear friend and colleague, actually hails from California, but received her JD from Case Western Reserve University, then served as a federal judicial clerk in the area and has now made Cleveland her home. Valisa is an up-and-coming lawyer who has already made a tremendous impact on the city. She was named to Crane's 40 Under 40 in the past. She is currently the first Assistant Deputy Inspector General and Chief Diversity Officer at the Cuyahoga County Agency of Inspector General, where she primarily focuses on ethics and compliance issues. And in all of her spare time, Valisa is an active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, as well as the Junior League of Cleveland. She is also a writing counselor for Minds Matter Cleveland. She sits on the board of directors for Women of Color in Law Incorporated, and she serves as the president of the Norman S. Minor Bar Association, the local bar for African-American attorneys. Then next to Valisa's right, we have Patrick Espinosa. Pat was born in Germany to Colombian parents and has called many places home, including Ohio, California, Florida, Texas, Washington, Colombia, and China. Pat earned a JD MBA at the University of Miami School of Law and opened up a sports agency in Miami after graduation. Subsequently, upon his arrival in Cleveland, Pat has devoted his attention to immigration issues. As a bilingual immigrant, Pat understands the issues that many of our underrepresented neighbors face and is in a position to help those in need. Pat is currently president of the Ohio Hispanic Bar and sits on several diversity committees at Case Western Reserve University School of Law and CMBA. To Pat's right, we have Neil Bhagat, a graduate of UCLA and Case Western Reserve School of Law. He is currently senior counsel in the corporate law department at Progressive. As a member of Progressive's employment law group, he is responsible for the full spectrum of labor and employment law. from managing litigation to handling agency proceedings, advising on aspects of HR compliance, including employee relations, accommodation and leaves, recruiting practices, and wage and hour matters. Prior to joining Progressive, Neil practiced labor and employment at Buckingham, Doolittle, and Burroughs here in Cleveland. Neil is the current president of the Asian American Bar Association of Ohio and past president of the South Asian Bar Association of Ohio. So please join me in welcoming Arjun. And so just so we can jump right into this discussion, I will first turn it over to Belisa to give us just a little bit of background about why minority bars were formed, why they're important, the obstacles that they face, and essentially why we're here today.
So, so minority bars are formed because just as we have an issue now with the percentage of diverse attorneys, we've always had this issue. And the numbers have always been dismal. And so there's always been a need for sort of community amongst attorneys of color. So I'll give the example of the Norman Minor Bar Association. It was formed from 4 other clubs. There was the John Harlan Law Club, the Cleveland Lawyers Association, the Cleveland chapter of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, and the Black Women Lawyers of Greater Cleveland. And these clubs were all formed to address the concerns of a very small percentage of the legal community, Black lawyers, that unfortunately weren't being attended to by the majority. And so these groups provided a safe place for Black lawyers where they could find role models, trailblazers, they could be mentored, they could take on leadership positions, and it was a great jumping off point for lawyers who were just getting out there to get exposure and get leadership. And so, unfortunately, that is still true today. These organizations are a safe space for attorneys of color, a place where they can sort of get that mentoring and role modeling that is needed for every attorney, where they may not be getting that at their firm. They may not be getting that at their government office, but they had an organization where they could turn to get some of that support. And the other piece is that these bars sort of face some obstacles. Because they're usually smaller, there's a lack of funding. There may be a lack of physical space or an address. You're sort of meeting at the library, you're meeting in somebody's house, you're meeting in all these different places. Many times there's no paid administrators. It's a volunteer administration. So we're all working either as practicing attorneys or like me as a non-traditional attorney full-time. You have families, you have other things you're doing, and you're running an organization. And there may be sometimes a lack of succession planning. So the same person is the president for 10 years because there's no planning about how are we going to hand down, pass the baton of leadership to other people. And then there's usually a small membership. And so you got to work with what you have. So these organizations were founded as a support system. They continue to be a support system, and they continue to face obstacles. And so the MOU that we signed and the relationships that we now are cementing are going to be really helpful for all of our organizations in terms of coming together and sort of being better as a whole as opposed to as a part.
And I just want to kind of piggyback on some of that. So with our country becoming soon a majority-minority nation, could you just give just a little bit more about, why these bars are still relevant? One could argue that they could just be subsumed by the work of the local bar, but why do we still kind of need a separate space?
I would say that diversity is, one of these buzzwords, but diversity doesn't work unless there's inclusion. You could have as many people of color as you would like, but if they don't want to stay, if they don't feel comfortable, if they feel like I'm the only one here, I need to find people who look like me, then that's a problem. And unfortunately, in a lot of the legal profession spaces, it's still very white and very male. And so perhaps attorneys of color don't feel comfortable in those spaces yet. And so again, I go back to this MOU with the CMBA. It's, you know, our hope that more of our members will start to join the CMBA, get involved, and then more of the CMBA members will join our bar association. We can learn from each other, do more things together, and then attorneys of color perhaps will feel more comfortable in these spaces, will get more involved, and will feel like this is for me. This is mine too. It's not just for white males.
So it seems like it's important in some sense for people to have a safe space with people who, you know, maybe look like them. Pat, can you talk a little bit about the importance of the visibility of minority bars?
Sure, I think this is one of the most important things. Is that once minorities are together, they're part of the CMBA, they're actually visible. Before this, there was nothing. Now we can go out and tell people, hey, you know, we have an MOU, we have bars of color, it's coming to the forefront. So the community sees that. Without that, the community never really sees that they could have access to a law. They see something that's represented as a minority being lawyers, and they think to themselves, hey, there's more people doing it, I can do it. Once the communities see more people from their background representing the profession of law, they start to understand and grasp that coming from their background, it's not an impossible barrier to entry. It also gives them a sense of affirmation when they see someone who is an attorney who is of a minority. It gives them hope. It gives them maybe self-worth that they can see that, hey, I can do that as well. Especially for the youth as well, the children in our community, once they see that someone that looks like them is in a position, a leadership position, such as some members on this board and people in this room, it opens up their mind. It changes stereotypes. The stereotypes right now are that only white males can succeed in law, and many of those people in this room and on this panel have helped change that stereotype. Once that stereotype changes, it makes it easier for minorities to be included.
And you talked about the youth. Can you talk also a little bit about specifically law school students, and maybe some of the other people in the panel might want to talk about this as well in terms of what, you know, your respective organization offers in terms of resources for law school students?
Law school students, I know actually our organization doesn't have a program yet, but I know that Case Western did do they had a special program for minority law students. Generally, because minority law students come from backgrounds that they don't have a mom and dad that's a lawyer, so they need they don't have the head start that, say, many other non-minority students do. So with the program at Case Western, helps them get up to speed on testing and other stuff they haven't been exposed to.
I can speak to that a little bit. We have the minority clerkship program at the CMBA, and that's actually how I got involved in the Bar Association, the Cleveland Bar Association. When I arrived in Cleveland, I met our Judge Ronald Adrian, chaired the diversity committee, and it was a place where a lot of young minority attorneys got their start in being active in the Bar Association. And so we struggled for a number of years to try to think of ways to be more inclusive and deal with the numbers issues in terms of people of color working at law firms. So we drafted a number of documents to set up the clerkship program, and there are a lot of starts and stops, and we have Magistrate Judge Clifford and so many others that were involved in the effort. So the program's been up and running since 1999, and we're very proud of the program. There are a number of attorneys that are now partners that got their start working in the minority clerkship program. The whole idea behind the program is just to give people an opportunity. What we wanted to do is focusing on first-year law students and have them get an opportunity to interview with the firm. And we had the interviews very early on in their first year, so that it would give everybody an opportunity. And what we found is that many of the law students that got opportunities, although they might not fit the traditional criteria that many law firms look at, they just went in there and worked very hard and became very successful, got an offer, came back the next summer, and a number of them have gone to be partners, including our very own Greg Geis, who's the Vice President of Diversity.
The Norman S. Minor Bar Association has a particular focus on the diversity pipeline. We send lawyers to speak to students at the Stephanie Tubbs Jones Summer Legal Academy. We sometimes send lawyers to the Lunch and Learns for the Stokes Scholars Program through the CMBA. But in terms of our own programming, last year we had the inaugural Greater Cleveland Law Fair. And we partnered with Cleveland Marshall and Case to put together a fair for pre-law students. We had over 40 law schools from around the country come here to Cleveland to recruit our students into law school. And we held that at Case, and we had over 100 registrants for that. It was an amazing event. We also have the Law Student Summit for Success. We've been doing that. This will be our 4th year in September of 19. And that is generally hosted and sponsored by Tucker Ellis. And it's an event for 1Ls and upperclassmen to come and sort of learn things that maybe they didn't even know they needed to know about law school and how to get through law school, how to find a job, how to network. And then we end with a networking brunch where we invite local attorneys to come and mix and mingle with the law students. So that's their second month in law school, and they're already meeting people and learning things that maybe they didn't know. We also started a mentoring program last year. 2 of the chairs are here, Devontae and Aaron, and that's for 1Ls. And then this summer we added a bar component where folks who were taking the bar got a mentor. And as a part of that mentoring program, we do a summer clerkship workshop. This past January, it was hosted by Grassi Dow, and they helped us teach the students about, what you should be sort of doing when you interview, what your writing should look like, how you should be working on your writing so that you can do well during your clerkship, and then we did mock interviews afterwards. So we have quite a few programs, and we think that focusing on the diversity pipeline is key because these are the folks who are coming after us. We want them to have a better experience than we did. We want them to know more than we knew when we were in law school so that they can be successful.
Yeah, so that's great hearing about some of the initiatives with the CMBA and Norman S. Minor, Hispanic Bar. But in terms of this MOU and collaborating together, now I know Marlon, you played a big role in that process. What was kind of the thinking behind that initially when we were first starting to discuss that?
Well, there's a lot of different things. First of all, I think we've been meeting for about a year now. Maybe about this time last year, we were all talking about the idea. We were looking at a number of different models. There is a national organization of our parent organizations where they meet every year in Washington to make sure that they're moving in the right direction. So there's nothing like this has been tried on the local level. And the reason why I think it's important, number one, I'm the first African-American president of the bar, and I wanted to make sure that we had something that's going to move the bar forward as it relates to this important issue of diversity. And we stand on the shoulders of Carter Strang, who started us off. I think we were probably one of the first bars in the country that had a VP for diversity. So I think it's important for every president to move the ball forward, especially me in my position. But one of the important things here to remember in the context of the MOU is that, and it kind of goes to the question of why they're relevant and why we need them, is that there's a history of exclusion Many people do not know that African Americans were prohibited from joining the ABA up and through the 40s, and many African Americans will tell you that even though they were able to join after that point, the doors weren't really officially open. So as a consequence, we haven't had as much involvement, and there's still some skepticism. And the important role of the bars of color is that they form the initial welcoming committees in the individual communities. And the bars of color, they have networks, not only on the local level, but the state level, regional level, and national level. So if a firm is trying to recruit someone to come to Cleveland in this digital age, one of the first things a recruiter is going to do is they're going to Google online to see if that particular organization is still viable. And what we found happened from my experience as a president of the Minor Bar, as Lisa mentioned, we don't have a lot of infrastructure and resources, so you have somebody that's moving like gangbusters being a president of a local bar of color, and they get burned out. So you might have a website or an address that's several years old. And so some people say, well, why is that a Cleveland bar issue, Cleveland Metropolitan bar issue? Well, it's an important issue because those are the welcoming committees for people of color. And to the extent that those organizations aren't working, that's where we get our recruitment from in terms of diversity in the bar. And also it helps in terms of recruitment, in terms of firms like your own. If they want to attract people, that's the first place they're going to look. The other concept too is that I look at it in the context of the Georgetown, where I went to law school. And it's kind of the same principle. You have to have a support system in place for people of color. And we had that support system, and it really blossomed. In fact, when I graduated, we had the largest African American student population in the country. In the 80s, we were probably one of the first law schools that was predominantly female. We had a female dean. And this didn't happen by accident. What happened is the administration really supported the affinity organization, the Hispanic bar, the Asian bar, women's bar. And what they found is that when these students came to Georgetown and they had their comfort zone, people who looked like them were for them. They blossomed, and they were also involved in the overall university as well. So we're kind of looking at that model in terms of the bar association. If we're helping them, they're blossoming, it's going to fall to the benefit of the bar association and also overall legal community.
You talked a little bit just now about support. Neil, I want to ask you, you worked at a law firm before, and how much, do the local bars, especially the minority bars, focus on supporting the retention of minority attorneys at law firms?
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of our focuses at the Asian American Bar Association. We do have a smaller pool of APA or Asian Pacific attorneys, no doubt about it. And what we encourage is informal mentoring. We want networking. We want people to know that you can do it. And we are lucky to have examples of people who have made it here, but there's still very few Asian partners in town, and that's just a reality. And so having that example is something that we try to reinforce. We try to reinforce those connections, starting at the law school level and moving them up. Even as young associates. As many of us who have been associates know, it's a tough job. The first couple of years are rough, and having a support network of people who've been there can be helpful, and also a sounding board outside of your firm. Does this make sense? Is this normal? Is this how it goes? Those are helpful resources. And to Marlon's point about retention and recruitment, I'm thinking of an example that happened just a few weeks ago. We have somebody coming from, we have a law student at 3L who's at a top law school in California, and she is considering whether to come here. So the person she reached out to was our bar organization because it provided a built-in network to figure out, what is this network like? Right or wrong, there's some perceptions of what life might be like in Cleveland, and our job is to help say, you can make it here. There are a lot of opportunities here, and there are people who look like you. And so we've been able to kind of arrange with, people who she might know at the law firm that she's interviewing with, and kind of just giving a good background about what it might be like to practice here.
And
Go ahead to that. So we have the same issue in the Black legal community in terms of, Mark has highlighted this, associates making it all the way through to partner, or even making it to being an associate. And so And over the last 2 years, we've had a program called Pitch Perfect, and it's for associates and junior partners, and it's chaired by Ed Blakemore at Rockwell and Mark Young at Retzel, so a partner and in-house counsel. And they, over the course of a couple of months, they meet with Black associates and junior partners who sign up for the program, and they just sort of teach them the game, so to speak. You know, this is how you make it. This is what you need to do. This is what you should be doing. And then at the end of that, they have like a roundtable lunch with several in-house and general counsels in Northeast Ohio, and they get to sort of make their pitch. This is what I do. This is how I do it. And it's been a pretty great program in terms of sort of the mentoring and the coaching that Neil was talking about, getting that in a concentrated amount of time and hopefully helping them to understand, you know, this is what you should be doing. And actually, Gabrielle is here. She participated in the program 2 years ago. So we see that as also an issue, and we try to address it as well.
So in terms of programming like that, well, first, let's talk about before the MOU. Are there examples of times when the minority bars have collaborated in the past? And, you know, was that successful?
So right now where we collaborate is for social events, which are always fun. The last 4 years maybe, we've collaborated on the summer social that we do every year at Heinen's, and it's usually in June. And that's a lot of fun. It's all of the bars of color, and we usually try to invite summer associates. So they, you know, as Marlon said, when they're thinking about, you know, do I want to come to Cleveland? Do I want to take this offer? They see this wonderful community of bars of color during their summer associate period, and they can sort of talk to people and get their experiences and find out, you know, what do they think about Cleveland? And then we also do a holiday get together in December in Judge Oliver's chambers, and that's also a lot of fun. And that's sort of, you know, seeing all of your friends and your colleagues that you maybe haven't seen all year, and wishing them well for the new year. So those are our social events. We're hoping to do some more co-curricular events together, maybe some CLEs, but this relationship will help us to, you know, have the space and the time to really work on those types of things.
We do have a CLE planned on March, next week? May 31st as part of our cultural legacy series. So we had all talked about having one person from our respective communities kind of talk about the historical background of our individual communities. It's kind of in concert with the series that we're going to be launching tomorrow. We have the Irish bar on tomorrow, then the Italian bar, and the Soviet bar. And the whole idea is that if we understand our backgrounds and where we came from, perhaps we'll get along better and be a more cohesive legal community and a more cohesive community. So that's something we're working on. We're pretty excited about it. So.
And that reminds me that this past year, at Marlon spearheaded a D&I diversity and inclusion series, and we all co-sponsored that series. So we've already began to work together more cohesively.
And I guess looking ahead, you already started touching on this, but Pat, is there something that you're seeking from this whole collaboration? What do you envision in terms of the next steps?
Next step is just increasing our visibility, letting more people know that we actually exist. There is a need. I run the website for the OHBA. I know it had been defunct in the past, and we got one. I built it up 2 years ago, but yeah, I get messages all the time. I got someone going back to recruitment. I have no idea because it was like half an hour ago, but someone wanted me to post the job listing on the site, which I will do later on. I get messages from firms in town. I get messages from other lawyers wanting to come here. And I think about that, well, that didn't exist before. There was no support system. There was no questions about firms wanting Hispanics or Hispanics coming to town and wanting to meet people. So from here, I just look like, even though we're a very small community, the Hispanic community, being a cohesive organization among all the minorities kind of just helps with support, and it increases, our presence here.
That was something too that I want to touch on that Pat mentioned, is that this was all envisioned by Chief Justice Moyer when he established the Racial Fairness Commission about 25 years ago. And I believe my mentor, Judge Ronald Adrian, and the late Stephanie Tubbs Jones were chairs of that group. And what they really found in studying how do we make sure people of color are more included in the overall legal community is that they envisioned majority bars, such as the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar, reaching out and providing assistance. So this is something that we're able to kind of go full circle on the legal assistance. Because I think there's an understanding, as Pat mentioned, is that not only they provide mentoring and networking opportunities, for those bars of color, but also that helps, get people to town, and also it helps us in terms of recruitment and retention issues.
And indirectly, the CMBA has helped me. We've all touched it. It's tough. We all have family lives. We have our practice, and then running the organization on top of that and getting back to people. Having the support system indirectly helps people that are contacting me about opportunities. So I would thank you again, Marlon, for speaking.
And I think, so one thing that kind of stood out to me is that I think sometimes as minorities, we think that this is kind of our cross to bear in terms of figuring out the solutions to issues of diversity. But I think one of the things that's unique about this is this kind of speaks to the role of non-minorities in that process as well. Neil, could you say a little bit about that and what this kind of signals to our legal community?
Yeah, first, just seeing the presence here in the group of people who've come, it says a lot. It says that people are interested in these ideas, because I think we all have shared interest in diversity, improving access to justice, and these are all kind of objectives. And so to see the CMBA take a lead on this, especially under Marlon's leadership, is something we haven't seen, really that I haven't seen now. I'm newer to the law in this community, and so I can't speak to past efforts. But what I can say is we feel the support. We know there's a shared interest in advancing our legal community. And so we are hopeful that formalizing some of those efforts will really make a difference. I think to Marlon's point about you have a strong president and then you lose that president. Formalizing some of these efforts so that we don't lose all of that institutional knowledge, both on the affinity bar organization and on the CMBA side, we do think that will help continuity in the long term.
And then I think we can get together and talk about those issues in terms of succession planning and share ideas. I know Lisa does a great job on the website, just sharing that information, not only with prospective leaders of the organized minors, but also sharing that information with the bars of color. Because from my perspective, the pie is big enough for all of us, and that's kind of the whole idea of the MOU, that we all can work together and we all can benefit, not only in terms of bars of color, but as an overall community.
And at this time, if anyone else, I want to open it up for questions.
Hi, thank you for putting on this talk. I think it's really important, and it's great to hear that the minority bar associations are collaborating together. So I heard a lot of talk about recruitment of law students and recruitment of minority lawyers. But I want to hear about what your respective organizations are doing for outreach to the non-legal community, to the minority communities that may not necessarily know that there are minority bar associations, minority attorneys that will affect them, that can help them. So I'd like to hear that.
Sure, I can speak a little bit to that. We certainly, in addition to inquiries from potential attorneys who want to join our Cleveland legal community, we will get inquiries from members of the community who are just looking for a lawyer, right? Looking for business. That's great. But this is part of the access to justice. There may be language barriers. There may be other issues, and so finding somebody who sort of looks like them that they may feel more comfortable with is one of our goals that we've reached out. And we've also looked for a little bit more community advocacy. So one aspect are joining with legal aid or hosting legal clinics that are focused on very specific topics that might be relevant. So immigration, that's one that we always see a lot. We try to partner and make sure that our membership can support that. But even in the non-legal, for example, next week we are hosting a panel to encourage APAs to run for office. We have a number of Asian elected officials who are participating on the panel. It's not really a legal thing, it is a democracy thing, and so that's where we are trying to focus our efforts.
Okay, our organization actually partners with the Northeast Ohio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which has very close ties to the community. So it's a, you know, we're not very widespread, and this relationship has just started, but at least we have partners in the community that we can go to let companies know that there are diverse attorneys here.
So we have quite a few partnerships that we cultivate over the years, and we try to keep them up. And we also, similar to Neil, we do different events in the community that aren't necessarily just for lawyers. For example, earlier this year, we did an event called "So You Want to Run for Public Office." That was open to the community. On Saturday, actually, we have an event called Love Doesn't Hurt. It's a domestic violence discussion and resource fair, and that's free and open to the public. It's going to be at the downtown public library, and that's for the community. We want people to come out and learn more about domestic violence and how it affects family and friends, and get resources. So we have partnerships with people like our organizations like the President's Council, and Legal Aid Society. We do a lot of brief advice clinics, and we also put on events that are not just for lawyers, but for the community.
We have an array of programs, including our brief advice clinic that we initiated with the Legal Aid Society a number of years ago. And I'm sure a number of people in the audience are perhaps familiar with that, where we have lawyers that basically work with the Legal Aid Society, and as a result of those volunteers going to Legal Aid Society, they're able to kind of spread their resources and help more people. We also are involved in the 3 R's program, go into the school districts and help the students prepare for their proficiency examination. So that was a program started by one of my predecessors, Hugh McKay, and it's in the East Cleveland and Cleveland school districts, which are predominantly minority. So there's opportunities in that particular program for not only lawyers but non-lawyers to get involved and help the community move the ball forward.
Any other questions?
I have one. The minority clerkship program has evolved over the years and faced certain challenges, and it appears there's kind of an uptick in terms of interest in it because some changes were made. Could you talk to that, including giving law firms a little more of an opportunity to actually select who they wanted? I think that was.
Yeah, I was involved early on when I arrived in Cleveland in the 90s, where we went back and forth on those rules about, you know, should we place someone at the law firm, should there be interviews, and I remember some very tense meetings, and so we were able to kind of see the program evolve. But I think the main thing is that we want to look at the larger picture. The larger picture is just giving people opportunity, letting them get an opportunity to prove themselves on the field. Because a lot of people, they may be first-generation lawyers, and they may not get it that first year, but doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to be a very good law student or a good lawyer. So the clerkship program just allows people to get on the playing field, show their skills, and as I said before, it has been very successful in my estimation in Cleveland, in that a number of partners in town got their start through the clerkship program, through the efforts of Judge Adrian and yourself and so many others.
And I think I'll just add to that from the law firm perspective. So at Squire Patton Boggs, we participate in the minority clerkship program. It's been a great experience for us, and I think some of the changes that have been made have been beneficial to the extent that law firms have more input into the selection process. It makes us more invested in the students who come to intern with us, and so I think it's kind of been a win-win scenario for both sides.
Yeah. Can I add, because I work with that program very closely, and thank you for interviewing. We do, a lot of us do have an opportunity to meet students and come and do the interviews. So representatives of the employers actually come and interview the students, and then they also have a chance to review everybody's application and materials, and then kind of rank order, identify who they would like to work with. So they're much more involved. They're also allowed to hire again the next year if they really like a candidate. We did that here at the Bar Association. We hired our clerk from last year, and he's clerking again with us this summer. So a lot of changes with employer input to that program, and it's going strong. We also now work with Akron. The Akron Bar Association and the University of Akron Law School is a partner in the program, and we are spreading our footprint throughout Northeast Ohio. So it's growing. It started, again, back in 1999. Happy to say this year, too, we had 28 applicants, and in prior years, the number's been a lot lower. So we're very excited about the interest in it and the number of minority students at the law schools.
We've been very fortunate to have Mary Grove and so many people from the CMBA staff, support the program. I see so many volunteers over the years that have worked so hard. A number of our board members are here as well, so lots of Joe and so many others. So very, very helpful, and the program wouldn't be successful without the great work of our staff and our volunteers.
Sure, it's your turn. I guess my question is, what are the minority bars doing to help get more minority candidates just in law school and graduated? Because if you look at the ABA or the NALP data over the last decade, the number of minority candidates, the percentage, it hasn't increased any. So are there hurdles? Are there issues? What are you guys doing to help try and just get those numbers up to begin with?
I mentioned earlier that we had a pre-law fair here last year, the first ever in Cleveland. And in addition to having 40 law schools here, we also had two sort of sessions beforehand where we had admissions professionals from Cleveland Marshall and from Case explain in depth, here's the application process, this is what you need to do. This is because a lot of the issues, I think, with getting into law school is misinformation or no information. They just don't understand the process and what is needed, and that it really doesn't start when you decide I want to go to law school. It starts your freshman, sophomore year in college. You got to have certain grades. You got to take this test. You should do a testing service to help you pass the test. These are things that a lot of students don't know. And they don't know that these are things they should be doing. Someone needs to hold them by the coattail and say, here are the things you need to do. And so we had admissions professionals, then we also had current law students talk to these pre-law students about, here was my experience, here are things that I wish somebody had told me before I applied to law school. And in addition, we have our mentoring program that we do for 1Ls, because we know 1L years where a lot of things can go wrong, and you can either be retained or you can be asked to leave. And so we wanted to get in there at the beginning of their 1L year and give them a mentor, and also with the Law Student Summit for Success, give them some information, because I'm going to say that again, the key is misinformation or no information. When you don't have the right tools, skills, information, coaching, you're set up for failure. And so I think that's what's missing, and that's a huge stumbling block, is that there's just not enough information. They just don't know what they don't know. And so we try to stand in that gap and give them as much information as possible and as much support as possible.
Well, that's an important point in terms of law school, because again, we're dealing with so many people that are first generation and they don't know the rules of the game. For example, I didn't know very much about prep courses, for the LSAT. So to be able to provide that information to students that are interested in the law can be invaluable. It's going to increase their chances of being admitted. And then Carter, I don't know if Carter wants to talk a little about his outstanding efforts during his presidential term when he initiated the Stoke Scholars Program. That's kind of part of our pipeline efforts of helping students not only in high school, through college, and then in law school with the clerkship program. And as a result of those efforts from Carter and so many others, we have a number of students that have gone through that process and are now practicing law, i.e. Brandon Brown. So I don't know if Carter, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and Mary's been instrumental in that. It started during I was president in 2012 and 13. And we, as has been outlined, the CMBA really has had great pipeline programs. imagine almost 500 attorneys going out and teaching in the schools on a monthly basis, and that's 3 hours. So you're establishing that contact, and those kids that have some interest in law are then encouraged, hey, why don't you think about mock trial? Your school has mock trial, why don't you do that? And they give that a try and they like it. Well, then they go on to college, and we had nothing for kids in college. We have a minority clerkship program. If they were in law school, that was great. So we had a pipeline, but there was a hole in the pipe, and the hole in the pipe was when they went to college, whether they went locally, or even worse if they went away, because a lot of those kids then would never come back. They'd have no reason to come back to Cleveland. So the Lewis Stokes Scholars Program provides paid summer legal internships, $1,800 for graduates of the East Cleveland or Cleveland school systems who are interested in law. And that's all they have to say. I have an interest in being an attorney. And so they come back for the summer, and they're placed at legal nonprofits, law firms, public entities, and have a great experience. They're given a mentor where they work, and there are workshops for them all during the summer. And so it's been a very good program because we've seen now, and it's a long-term investment. And so this was started in 12 and 13. These kids were in college, some of them as freshmen. We're now seeing that pay off at Cleveland Marshall. We have 4 1Ls that are Stokes Scholars. We have 2 3Ls. Brandon and Brett, we now have 2 graduates from law schools. They're not only graduated, but they're here in Cleveland. So it's that brain gain, right? We didn't lose these kids to somewhere else. Mary can speak more fully to it. She has all the statistics. I think we're now over 70 Stokes Scholars. They are allowed to come back for a second summer. We have different programs for them depending on how many years they've come back. A great thing about this is you talked about mentoring, is how they mentor each other. So the kid that's been in it for the 3rd year as a Stokes Scholar, who's about to go on to law school, is mentoring the freshman in college who's just started Stokes Scholar. Mary?
Yeah, I would say, they've developed a great cohort amongst them, and our current chair of the Stokes Scholars Committee is Brandon Brown, who we met in 9th grade. He's been in our pipeline program since 9th grade. He's a City of Cleveland lawyer. And we're very excited. Our 3Ls, we've got 4 that are graduating this May. 3 already have lined up jobs, and some very good jobs. And they're all here in Cleveland, which we love. So the program continues to grow, and I know that we work with, the Bars of Color support our program and work with our students, and it's a great partnership effort. And it is comforting for them to know that they have bars that represent them and are there for them. So this is the type of thing, it's going to continue to grow and be strong. We now have a law school admissions boot camp. We're doing a writing workshop this summer for our newbies that are just going off to college. And they also, our Stokes Scholars pay it back to the high school seniors in Summer Legal Academy. That's another one of our pipeline programs. So they actually have lunch and learns together and get to know those high schoolers that are going off to college. So you see these pipelines lining up and the students helping, reaching back and helping. And I see them becoming just a cadre of leaders in our Cleveland legal community as we go forward. And I'm sure some will end up being, like Marlon, Bar Association president.
Yeah, thanks to Darman Minor. That support includes paying for one of the Stokes Scholars summer internships every year.
Is attention being paid to equity education for potential employers? So say, Squire or some of the other, as the diversity increases, in numbers, that changes the entire culture at the, the firm or the entity. So we need to make sure that firms, even if they are, on paper advocating for inclusion, we want to make sure that the environments are actually inclusive and that cultural competence is, something that's a priority. So is there any, is there any intention to that, or do you see, opportunity for collaborating on, CLEs or bringing in consultants or something like that?
We haven't done that formally, but I love that idea. And maybe that's something where we try to avoid recreating the wheel. And so this is something potentially that we can discuss to make sure firms are certainly creating a welcoming environment. Informally, I think part of our networking or our mentoring is we know there are some really, really strong firms that have a really good diverse environment. We know there are other firms that may have opportunities. And so using what we know to help improve those firms is certainly something we should embrace.
I agree. We don't have a formal relationship with any firms or anything, but definitely there have been informal discussions about how things could work or how ways we could work together. And I think, again, sort of doing it as a unit cohesively is stronger and will be better supported. And so that's a wonderful idea and something that we can discuss.
A lot of times when you have a firm or an organization looking to attract or retain diverse talent, you hear that there aren't very many in Cleveland. Do you find that companies or law firms or other organizations are unaware how many of your members, are lawyers, how many, I guess, diverse lawyers there are actually in Cleveland?
Well, that's one of my frustrations. I'd like to take a hit at that a little bit. I mean, from my perspective, as I shared a little bit earlier, when people talk about the dearth of attorneys of color, I just look at my experience at Georgetown. And actually, my senior year, we graduated more African American students than Howard, and so these were just incredibly talented people. I was also still very active in the National Bar Association, where there are thousands of lawyers that meet throughout the year. So when I hear this this notion that there's nobody available, we can't find anybody, it just kind of rings hollow with me based upon my experience. So what my hope is that not only can we grow lawyers here organically through our pipeline programs, but as a result of our MOU and having a welcoming environment and doing sort of the ideas that we're talking about, we're going to do a better job of attracting people here. The other thing I think that will help is that when I travel around the country, there are a lot of Cleveland lawyers, people that grew up here that are in other places. So with a partnership like this, I think it will be more attractive for them to stay in Cleveland or remain in Cleveland. Or if they start their career elsewhere, they'll be able to come back to Cleveland.
The other thing that, and Marlon forgot to mention, this was his idea, is we've discussed putting together a directory. Because that's something that I hear a lot. Well, where are all the Black lawyers? And I'm like, I have a full roster. I know where they are, but I'm willing to share that information. And I think putting together a directory of here are all the Black lawyers, here are all the Asian lawyers, Hispanic lawyers, XYZ, in the Northeast Ohio region, they can no longer use that as an excuse as to why they can't find someone to recruit and retain. And it'll, be where they're at, what kind of, I guess what their background is, what kind of practice they have, whatever information we come up with. But that's something that we're working on. And I think that will be a great answer to where are all the lawyers of color.
Yeah. So I'm on the hiring committee at Squire. And one of the things that I've noticed is it seems like that it is a problem just in terms of information and exposure. I just know from being active and being in contact with some of the local bosses that there are students there, but some of my colleagues, they just really aren't aware. We just had an event last week. It was our Lewis Stokes 1L Diversity and Inclusion event, and we invited some of the local students, not just from Boston, but from all of the various minority affinity groups to come in and speak with some of our attorneys. And some of my colleagues were just very, impressed, and I'm like, oh wow, we didn't know that all these students were here. And it's just, I think a lot of it is just a matter of making sure that they have that information. So to the extent that we can all collaborate and work with law firms and other employers to make sure that they know just that there is a pool of talented, diverse attorneys out there. That's important. I guess if there are no more questions, I just want to thank our panelists one last time for all of their insight and words of wisdom. This is a great day in the history of the Cleveland legal landscape. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.